Hi, everybody. My name is Gary Gomes. You see me on this channel with the blue background and the ghost-like presence that can only come from the finest Zoom setting. And I'm here to talk with you again about Vedic astrology, in particular, sidereal astrology in general, and just to give you an idea on what's happening over the next week, both around the world and in your lives. Last week, I got a little bit verbose into the nature of reality, and that's a little bit of a flaw that I intend to address this week. I ran a little bit over. It was not my intent, and I'll talk more directly about. I just end up a conversation with a quick conversation about retrogrades. Retrogrades, because I received a response from a fellow astrologer saying he didn't really pay that much attention to retrogrades. And under normal circumstances, I don't either. I think one of the reasons that I focus so much on these past few months, with the retrogrades was because essentially we had 3-4 big retrogrades that went direct within about 2 to 3 weeks time. And that's really, so if a retrograde, let's say Mercury retrograde, is supposed to be something where you don't sign contracts, that's actually something I find a little disturbing that my fellow astrologers do. But there is a certain point to some of these retrograde motions. There is a certain aspects of them that can't be ignored. So let's say if you have a planet that's retrograde as it appears from the Earth, more of your attention is focused on the things connected with that planet from the Earth plane. So, and I almost want to automatically delete Earth plane because it sounds too new agey, but let me put it this way. If you're standing here, a retrograde is, as most of us know, is a relative condition. So if you think about when you're driving in a car or you're in a train, I've had this experience more in a train than in a car. But basically, if you're in a vehicle of any kind and you pass in front of it, and so let's say you have this, so let's see if you can see my hands. Say you have a speed motion, and essentially both objects are moving, but one object is moving faster than the other. The other object seems to be moving backwards. That's where retrograde is. And what it'll do is it'll draw your attention to that. So it can be a momentary, I've experienced a momentary disorientation when I've been traveling in a train and I've seen the background apparently moving backwards when I know the train has actually been moving forwards. And you tend to focus more of your energy on that particular backwards motion. So retrogrades in Vedic astrology are considered stronger than directs because they're slower. So slower planets, by definition, this is something you have to take into some consideration. When a planet is moving quickly to a sign, there's less focus on the Earth. There's less focus on the Earth, from the Earth side, on the attributes of that planet. So if something's moving fast, it's like Mercury moves fast, the moon moves quickly. So we don't pay that much attention except for moods when the moon changes signs from day to day. When the sun changes, when the sun changes signs, we may feel that. When Venus changes signs, we may go from like lighthearted to more heavily obsessed with the things we like, or more detached. But basically, these things are relatively they're relatively quick. If we have a Mercury retrograde, which is connected with communication, then communications will seem to be slow or misunderstood or difficult. And it doesn't mean we're incapable of understanding communications. That's not the point at all. But basically, there'll be a misinterpretation. Also, a Saturn retrograde will focus on Saturnian things, will focus on debts and obligations and slowness and obstacles a little bit more quickly, a little bit more readily. When Jupiter's retrograde, we'll focus on, are we making the right decision? Are we, so there's an introversive aspect to retrogrades. It doesn't mean they actually affect our, if we're conscious of them, we can, we can balance those. Also, the retrogrades happen in in normal circumstances, it's really not going to destroy our progress or hurt us. But Jupiter was debilitated in its retrogression, in its retrograde state. Saturn was in its own sign. So both planets were twisted a little bit. Mercury was with Mars, a planet connect. So the Mercury-Mars combination in Vedic astrology is considered to be a lying or falsehood combination. And so those three things were sort of accentuated over the past few months, over the past month in particular. So that's why I paid more attention to this retrograde cycle than I do to others. And like I said, we also had a Pluto retrograde, which ended October 5th, which, if you follow Western astrology, was pretty important. But I think one of the things is, so the retrograde's over, doesn't mean you don't make any progress, but it allows for more clear-headedness, I think, if you're moving forward. It also puts fewer obstacles in your way if you're moving forward. So there's less second guessing, less did I do the right thing? Am I doing the right thing? Will I do the right thing? Kind of activity that we'll encounter. So that having been said, so we're going to encounter retrogrades again. That's part of life. Again, it's important to keep in mind their relative motion. They don't control our actions. They don't stop us from getting things done. We ourselves are responsible for whether or not we get things done. Okay, so the retrogrades are essentially, so let's say you have there's I liken a retrograde to an accident when a person's on the road. The person still gets to their destination. They may get hauled up a little bit. That's about it. But these were, like I said, this particular cycle was kind of important because it affected the second house of the United States chart. It affected the 10th house of the United States chart. It affected certain parts of the world. And you can see certain slowdowns in supplies, which is Saturnian and Mercurial. And those kinds of things are still happening. And that's mainly because of Rahu. But we'll talk about that in a few seconds. Now, Rahu is also direct right now, if you look at the chart. So this is kind of an interesting day. Rahu directs a phenomenon that were introduced, I believe by Erlewine, and essentially they make for more accurate predictions of eclipses. So you'll have Rahu in stationary direct motion for a couple of days, and Ketu will also be in stationary direct motion. So essentially, these are imaginary objects in the sky. They're not real things, but they will provide a certain clarity and a certain balance and a certain um, coherence to the chart that Rahu and Ketu normally lack. So if Rahu's in the same sign with the moon, this will make people a little more anxious, a little bit more nervous. I know I was feeling it last night, but today I feel fine. I just feel very determined to get what I want. And I think that basically from this kind of a chart structure, you'll look, I'm going to fix the place. My apologies. Because I have a set of for Istanbul, Turkey, which I didn't know. Sorry about that. That's where I'm from. Location of Moby Dick. Okay. Not Nantucket as the TV series would have you believe, but New Bedford. All right. So nothing seems to be moving backwards, which is okay. So that essentially doesn't necessarily mean it's a good chart. It just means that nothing's moving backwards. So this will allow certain initiatives that you've been trying to get to, it'll actually give them a kind of a push. And so I've experienced that today personally. And I think one of the things you'll also notice is from this chart, we still have the Venus-Ketu conjunction, which will be over in about 7 days. It's been my personal experience that Venus and Ketu tend to make us a little bit unhappy, a little bit quick to anger and frustration, and can give us a certain feeling of despair because Venus is a little bit like the moon, it's a little bit moody. The Venus-Ketu conjunction is, so it's a little bit of anxiety. It does give strong emotional connections with those we care about, but it also gives a certain feeling of detachment or isolation. So if somebody we're really interested in, we'll say to ourselves, well, it's, if it works out, it works out. If it doesn't work out, yeah. Now, what's happened since that time is there's an axiom in Vedic astrology. I don't think it's actually written in any of the Vedic texts, but Mars in a sign ruled by Venus, which it is right now, and Venus in a sign ruled by Mars tends to make a person really hypersexualized. So that doesn't necessarily mean they'll go out. They'll go out on the town trying to pick up anybody, but essentially we get a little bit more interested in our sex lives, and this will be true for about 8 days because of Venus being in this particular sign. But Venus will move into Sagittarius in about 7 days, and that can actually hurt or destroy relationships because Venus will be moving into Mula Nakshatra, and Venus in Sagittarius is a very overly sensitive placement. And what I mean by that is basically, I'm just taking my time. Basically, we expect relationship partners to be ideal, or we expect relationship partners to sacrifice everything for us. And I think that's where so it's almost, there's a similar combination we have with Jupiter and Libra, which gives a lot of impulsiveness in relationships. But this is more, the relationship partner is hyper idealized. And if they hurt us, we take it really, really personally. We take it really, really seriously. So that'll be the next month for most of us. Mars in Libra will tend to have us more interested in connecting sexually with other partners or connecting in relationship wise. I'll be going on for about 2 months. So it's kind of interesting because you have this very sexually strong combination. Our egos aren't in the way because the sun's debilitated, and but also keep something in mind. It'll be very easy to get into fights with relationship partners because the Sun-Mars conjunction isn't going away anytime soon. Mars is aspecting Jupiter and Saturn, so there's this strong perfectionist trait that shows up in the chart. So Jupiter, so what that'll do is even going beyond relationships in terms of ethics, in terms of politics, in terms of belief systems, there'll be a tendency to banish people who don't agree with our belief systems. That'll go on until around mid-November. And I think you'll gradually see over the next year kind of an increased tolerance for different points of view. But if you thought things were bad in terms of like people freezing out other individuals because they didn't agree with them, this next month is going to get very, very hot. The Sun and Mars are going to stay together really for about another, I say about another 10 days. And Sun will actually 10 to 20 days, and Sun will move out of the combustion range with Mars. So Mars is still combust. A lot of the significations connected with Mars, like property, logic, and action will tend to be influenced by a low confidence Sun, and there'll be a lot of impatience to get what we want to get quickly. So just keep that in mind. Try to keep your temper. That's still a problem. And we just had a full moon this week. I spoke a lot about the full moon being really tough on relationships. And relationships, I should clarify, this is also business relationships. So it's not just, so when I say relationships, it's not just the people we deal with romantically or our life partners, or it's also friends, it's also workmates. The seventh house, which is a house connected with relationships in Vedic astrology, is also considered to be a house of partnerships. It's also considered to be a career-oriented house. So whenever you have a combination which affects the Lord of the seventh house, or a seventh house significator like Venus, or a planet like Mars, which has to do with anger, you're going to see some anger or some clashing in relationships. This will probably last for about another, it'll be at its most intense for about another week. Then it'll start to calm down a little bit. But again, we will see probably some relationships break up within about the first, I would say probably the last 2 weeks of the first week in October. The last week. No, I'm sorry. The first week in the first and second week in November, and we have another angry combination coming up with, but also kind of a defamatory combination coming up with the government in November as well, late November through December. So a lot of scandal and a lot of incoherence coming from the government, which is not a new phenomenon. We've experienced that for a while now, for a few years, but basically it'll get a little bit worse. But you'll see a lot of government scandals around the world over the next couple of months. Also, I think we better brace ourselves for some for some catastrophes or some, especially water and earth catastrophes coming up around the end of November and early December. And I'll talk about those more intensely next week. But in terms of overall activity, we have a Pisces rising sign. The Lord of the first house is Jupiter, is in pretty bad shape, and also Pisces is aspected by Saturn. Rahu moon is a lot of anxiety about disease around the world. This is not news to any of us. Mercury, though, is in really good shape. I mean, so that's one of the better things about this. You'll see a lot more clarity and truthfulness around communication over the next few months, and you'll see a lot more voices being paid attention to. So that's good. Mercury's exalted, so partnerships actually there should be a lot of communication about what the person wants and what the person doesn't want. And also communications between countries will be much better, much less hostile. They'll be more concerned with trying to improve trade and trying to improve financial growth. And that'll be blocked for about 7 days, like I said. But this Mercury's just about as strong as Mercury can be. And this is good for any of you who are interested in younger people or in communicating with younger people or working with younger people, because it's a good combination for that. Jupiter's in the 11th house. Friends will not be understanding. Friends will encourage people to be conservative. The workforce is usually represented by the moon, so the workforce is still scared. The general population is still scared, and that'll continue really until next March. I can see some improvement in economic activity coming when Jupiter enters Aquarius, and some improvement, even medical treatment, coming when Jupiter enters Aquarius on November 17th. And you'll start to see some more progress being made in terms of countries and companies pulling back a little bit from mandatory actions, but those will probably stay in place until the middle of next month. And I think you'll actually see when Venus hits Mula Nakshatra, which is over here in Sagittarius, it's kind of a destructive nakshatra. You'll actually see violence over shortages or some kind of large level protests about government regulation during that time. The other thing is, so we're going to look at the chart in a couple of seconds for the world, but I just want to look at the general chart and just give you like an idea of what general indicators. Again, keep in mind, I'm doing this once a week right now. I do have plans to get other guests on. I do have plans to invite Lolita, Rebecca back again, and Dr. Simone back again, and other people. And these are the reason I haven't is because of everybody's schedule has been kind of warped, and also I've had some personal, some more intense personal responsibilities I've been dealing with. But there are plans to get new shows on the air, and so if you can like, subscribe, and hopefully you like what I'm doing, and give me some encouragement by subscribing. And I am going to try to get to monetization, but I'm still pretty far away from that. In terms of minutes watched, not so far. In terms of subscribers, I still have a long way to go. So if you can share this with your friends, and if there are any topics you'd like me to see me cover, I'll be happy to do that. Again, I am checking out new equipment, and so we're trying to get a better viewing experience for you, but that'll probably take me a couple of months before I can even think about that just because of the arrangements I'm in right now. So let's go to the map of the world and let's see where the lines are falling, which we do every week. All right, so we did have some shootings in Texas. Excuse me, I'm very sorry. In Texas, last week, there's a Sun-Mars line in. So let's start from the left. Go from left to right. There's a Mercury line and a Moon line hovering between Hawaii and Alaska, sort of Alaska. The Moon line isn't hitting Alaska. It's a Mercury-Mars line in Alaska, so we can see a lot of lying or a lot of skullduggery in Alaskan politics. And the other thing is we have a Sun and Mars line somewhat close to the West Coast. So again, I'm not expecting things in California to improve markedly anytime soon. Saturn is going through Arizona, so you'll probably see some border conflicts down there, some problems going up through all the way from Arizona to North Dakota. You have a Rahu line passing up through Mexico, the border, and all the way up to Canada. So border issues are not just affecting the United States. And I'm not saying that this has nothing to do with whether I'm pro-open borders or anti-open borders. The Rahu line indicates there's a problem that it's not under control. It's not, or there's a lot of confusion about what the policy is. Let's put it that way. So until that policy gets more and is spilling over in line with the Jupiter line, so it's probably, so the policy's based on generosity, but it's not really coherent, and there'll be a lot of immigration up through Wisconsin, Michigan, and over here we have a Rahu Moon line over here as well, and that's going up through Texas. So there's a lot of anxiety in Texas, Oklahoma, up through the Midwest. And it's not all border stuff. A lot of it's economic stuff as well. Okay, so keep that in mind. It's not all connected with immigration. There's also anxiety connected with the oil industry, which is a large part of Texas and Oklahoma's economy. And also there's some danger of some flooding in, it looks like, Mississippi and down through Nicaragua. And over here, we don't have any lines going over the East Coast of the United States except for one Mercury line, which is close. So that's good. That actually gives a little bit of clarity to the Eastern United States. Mercury's really well placed. And the other thing is, Mercury's running through Brazil, so it looks like that government's finally getting its act together, although there are a lot of worries about the government lying to us and the government being a little bit heavy-handed as well. But it looks like Brazil's slowly but steadily improving. That may not last too long because Mercury changes signs within about 2 weeks, so you'll see more government deceit. The moon is passing close to to Africa, my apologies. And there's a Rahu line passing over the Azores. And so there'll be some government problems and passing close to Cape Verde. And also there's a Jupiter line passing through Iceland. So there'll be some policy issues with Iceland's government, some financial issues. They'll be trying to pull themselves out. Actually, for the first time in several months, I'm looking at England and Ireland, and they don't seem to be afflicted, but there still is fear because Venus is creeping over towards Portugal and Spain. And Saturn, but it looks like the countries which are having the biggest problems right now are, I need to move this over just a little bit, are Sweden, Norway, Finland, not so much, and throughout Eastern Europe, especially Poland, and all the way down through Eastern Turkey and Saudi Arabia. So those are the countries which seem to be having big problems. There's a nice Mercury line going through Turkey right now, which is very good for Turkey. It'll probably provide them with a lot more economic impetus over the next few weeks, a lot more clarity about where the economy is going, and a lot more trading. The other thing is we have a Sun-Mars combination, so there's a potential for violence in Western Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Somalia, and even Russia, and Ukraine. The other lines that I'm a little bit worried about are, we see a descending Jupiter line passing through Afghanistan and into Pakistan, so there's some instability in the government, but although it looks like it'll resolve itself pretty quickly. And Jupiter's also running right through, Rahu and Moon are also running right through India, so there's some concern about disease and fraud in the Indian government. Venus is passing over China, so again, trade with China is a big issue. Spread of disease in China is a big issue. The Chinese do not have it under control right now, at least according to this map. But there is more clarity in relations with Taiwan, with the Philippines, and in Indonesia. So those parts of the world are in relatively good shape, and Eastern China is in relatively good shape. Japan has a Sun and Mars line over, so there's some danger of violence or political anger in Japan, going all the way down through Australia. And New Zealand seems to be largely unaffected by these lines right now, although there is a Rahu line right next to it, which can, and a Jupiter line, which can indicate some fear or anxiety. So I think one of the things to keep in mind is, as we see developments in the chart over the next, keep in mind, we're, at least in the US, we're still dominated by Rahu. We'll be dominated by Rahu for about another, I'm doing the math in my head, about another 18 years minus starting 2016, so about another 13 years. So try not to be too impatient in the United States in particular, because we're going through a series of reconsiderations. Actually, the interesting thing to me is we'll come out more when we come out of a Rahu period. The United States usually tends to become more nationalistic. It doesn't have, so Jupiter in our chart isn't, it's very homebound. So there's even a risk the United States will become less interested in the affairs of other countries. Although I'm not really anxious about the end of the Jupiter period, because the last or the beginning of a Jupiter period, because the last time we had a Jupiter period, we ended up in World War One. So I'm not looking forward to that, and hopefully, as I look longer term, we won't end up in a conflict like that again. But this is really a period, especially in the United States, of reconsideration and reprioritization. Some tendency towards anarchism, and also just trying to think of the right way to put it. Prohibition started under Jupiter Mahadasha, but the urge towards it started under Rahu. So you're going to see more cultural conflict over the next 13 years, which should be interesting. I mean, that's one of the there's an old Chinese curse which says, "May you live in interesting times." I think we're bearing witness to this, but I think we've seen other interesting times before. I don't think, to be honest with you, this isn't the worst I've seen in the United States. So, and I wasn't alive during the Depression. So I think the late '60s were more, the sense that things were falling apart was much more prevalent. Around 68, 69, 70, 71, all the way through 74. So it's because that was our first big economic shock. We were involved in a war in which we were losing hundreds of thousands of people. I'm sorry, in which we lost 50,000. No, I'm sorry, I can't remember the number. We lost a lot of people, and I feel embarrassed. I can't remember how many. And right now we're in the middle of a pandemic, but pandemics, diseases aren't wars. A lot of my, I've seen some people try to make the analogy, and I can understand it up to a limited point, but a war is an act of humans. A pandemic is an act of nature. Even if it were the case that the disease was, and I'm not saying this is true, but even if it were the case that the disease was released unintentionally, that's still not an act of war. It's trying to think of the right words to say it. I'm not going to prejudge this as an act of aggression. I'm just not going to do it. All right. So let me just go back to and we'll look at the individual signs. All right. Like I said, suggestions for topic areas, I'm more than happy to consider. We'll talk more intensely about eclipses next week. Eclipses are things which are often feared, but often bring transformation. The Venus-Ketu conjunction is one of those things which is sort of like, it's sort of like an eclipse in that it causes changes in emotional states, but it also frees you to a certain extent from dependency. Let's put it that way. So in some ways, Ketu acts nastily. It can act. It can act very, very poorly in that it cuts a bond. But it can also, if you approach the right way, you can also look at this as a chance to cut the veil of illusion, to cut the veil of dependency. So I'm not encouraging anybody to separate from their wives or husbands, or their love interests, or their partnerships or their work. I'm just asking you to look clearly at it. The major chart. So let's go on to the major chart here. So let's start with Aries, and this has to do with what's happening with you personally. And we have about good 20 minutes to look at it this time, close to 20 minutes. And Aries is first house Lord is in the seventh house. So Aries is thinking a lot about relationships and a lot about winning in relationships and a lot about putting, a lot of their souls invested in a relationship life. They really want to win. They really want to, they're in love so much so they're losing part of their identity in the relationship. So that's what happens when the fifth house Lord gets debilitated in the seventh house for this rising sign. But they are starting to make some money. There are some people who are jealous of them. That is true, but they are starting to make some money, and you'll start to see the sign start to make more money within a couple of days, over the week. Mercury's in the sixth house. They'll have some problems with communication, but those will be overcome relatively quickly. And like I said, most of their energy is focused on relationship life this week and fear of loss of relationship, fear of severing the tie. Within about 7 days, that fear will go away. It'll dissipate. It'll be as if it never happened. Career life is still strong. This sign is very, very dedicated to his career and will do really pretty much anything to get ahead. But that'll also be mitigated a little bit when Jupiter enters Aquarius, and the sign will feel interested in more learning and more education. For Taurus has the moon in the first house. The moon is exalted in Taurus, and Rahu's considered to be exalted in Taurus too. So that's going to give a lot of demand for attention for the sign, a lot of uncertainty about relationship life, because essentially Venus is with Ketu right now, so Venus is not really thinking clearly about relationship life. It's really more, the sign is really more interested in itself, not in a bad way, but it's thinking more about itself than it normally does. And the Sri Lagna is connected with acquisition of wealth, so second house, this sign will be pretty good with money. Mercury's in the fifth house, very good with love affairs, or with any kind of creative endeavors. It should watch out for its health, though, because the Sun-Mars conjunction down here can be a little bit dangerous or a little bit threatening. Relationship life, like I said before, is a little bit hurt or damaged. But Jupiter's in the ninth house as Lord of the 10th. Jupiter's in the ninth house, as Lord of the 11th house of gains, and Saturn's in the ninth house as Lord of the 10th house and the ninth house. So essentially their career life should go okay. Relationship life is a little bit dodgy, but career life should be fine. Children should be fine too. And like I said, keep in mind, there's always the potential for love affairs for this sign, so just be a little careful if you want to keep your relationship together. For Gemini, Home life should be excellent. They'll feel more secure. They'll feel more stable. Some problems with kids. Kids will lack confidence or be a little bellicose. Venus and K2 in the sixth house. Be careful of sexual contact because there is either some kind of potential for disease or more likely some scandal connected with relationships. Seventh Lord is Jupiter, Lord of the seventh house, is in the eighth house. So again, this sign is a little bit worried about relationship life. That'll go away within about a month's time. And a good solid relationship will start for this sign. The 10th house is ruled by Jupiter. Lord of the 10th is in the 8th, so that this means career can be put in the background just for a little while. Jupiter's a little bit weak. Within about a month, you'll start to see it improve radically, and you'll start to see more people flock to the sign for learning and for wealth. And so this is a pretty good chart for Gemini rising. For Cancer rising, Saturn and Jupiter in the 7th house. Again, still difficult for relationships. And this sign will be a little bit angry or a little bit ticked that it's not getting quite what it wants. And Venus and K2 in the 5th, the relationship partner will still seem a little bit distant or a little bit uncertain. Although creativity is very high, and it's the ability to judge things psychically is very high. The other combination I want to draw attention to is, so all these other houses look okay, but Rahu in the 11th house with Moon, watch out that friends don't betray you or don't talk behind your back. So there could be some criticism of you, and not all your friends are friends. Let's put it that way. This will be underscored this month. Sun rules Leo. The sun is debilitated really for another 24 days or so. And that tends to mean the sign lacks confidence. It lacks a little bit of self-assurance. It's got ambition, though, which is a good thing. And Mars, which is considered the great planet for this particular rising sign, is well placed in the 3rd house in terms of fulfilling desires. Mercury, the Lord of the 2nd house, is placed in the 2nd house, and this creates what's called a wealth-producing combination. Venus and K2 is in the 4th house. A person will be a little bit uncertain about whether or not they should stay where they are or to somewhere else. Jupiter's in the 6th house with Saturn, so the sun has to be a little bit careful about health issues and relationships. Again, still stymied in terms of relationship life. Career-wise, again, frustration connected with career, but financial gains look good. For Virgo, finally a good month for Virgo in terms of its actual intelligence, its actual ability to get things done. Sun and Mars are placed in the 2nd house, so this sign will be quick to temper, unfortunately, this month. And Venus and K2 very tough to please. Jupiter's in the Lord of the 4th house. I'm just checking time, excuse me for doing that. Jupiter's in the Lord of the 4th house in the 5th house, so that tends to give this sign some problems with children, some problems with creativity. So creative processes, although the thoughts will be strong, the creative work will be rather dull or like something they've done before. So that's a little bit difficult for this sign. And Rahu Moon in the 9th house. Some minor difficulties with supervisors. There's some anxiety about the supervisor relationship or the teaching relationship, but this isn't bad. The Sri Lagna's in the 10th house, which is good for money. For Libra, Sun and Mars are in the first house, so there's a lot of thought about friends. There's a lot of thought about relationship life. This sign is always has some issues with self-confidence, and it's really uncertain of itself. Will be uncertain of itself for about the next week or so. Then it'll be willing to make big changes relationship-wise. But again, one of the things I'd advise people not to do is to make quick changes over the next few months. I keep thinking about that K2 in the second house, and that is you could destroy your home without really meaning to, and you could destroy your relationship partner without really meaning to. Jupiter and Saturn are in the fourth house. That's good for educational life, so the person will be a strong student. Moon and Rahu are in the eighth house. Expectations of gains are indicated in the chart, but they won't be quite as high as the original expectations are. But there'll be a lot of interest in occult or spiritual knowledge and a lot of growth in that area. Also, Mercury's in the 12th house, exalted. So this is a good month to meditate, a good month to study esoteric subjects like astrology. A good time to write, really, to be truthful. Scorpio, Venus is in Scorpio. So this is considered one of the negative combinations in Western astrology. It's not quite so bad in Vedic astrology. But the K2 there tends to make it a little bit, you won't know whether or not relationship interests are being completely truthful with you in the relationship. People who are interested in relationship-wise will tend to have real problems making up their mind. That'll be true really until around March. The other thing to keep in mind is this sign will have a lot of courage this month. Have a lot of determination. A lot of anxiety over relationship life and career life are indicated, and a lot of inheritance of money from a relationship partner. Mercury's in the 11th house, very good for financial gains, and Sun and Mars are together in the 12th house. So again, some proclivity towards cheating, towards misrepresenting oneself, even career-wise. All right, so the next sign we're going to go to is Sagittarius. Sagittarius has Saturn and Jupiter in the second house, so that's a good wealth combination for the chart. So even though the accumulation of wealth will be slow, it'll be positive. Rahu and Moon in the sixth house, there'll be some concerns over health issues. Sri Lagna in the seventh house is very good for financial gains for the spouse or relationship partners or business partners. Mercury's in the 10th house. This sign can do no wrong career-wise this month. The Sun and Mars in the 11th house, some gains, but they'll tend to be taken away by government interference. And Venus and K2 in the 12th house, a lot of interest in spiritual life, a lot of interest in savings, but K2 will make it go on things like vehicles or other assets. Saturn and Jupiter, so we're going as a Capricorn. Saturn and Jupiter are in the first house in Capricorn. So this creates what's called a Sasha Yoga, by the way, for Virgo suns or rising signs. It's what's called a Buddha Yoga. And no, actually, hold on a second. It's not a Buddha Yoga. It's a different yoga for Mercury. But essentially, this will give this Saturn yoga will give really strong administrative authority. This sign will be very good at administration. Rahu and Moon are in the fifth house, kind of being attracted to the wrong people. Basically, that's what it indicates. And relationship life will be a little bit tough because of that. Mercury's in the ninth house. This is good for this sign. It gives it a lot of financial gains. Sun and Mars are in the 10th house. That's good for finances as well, especially from the spouse. And Venus and Ketu are in career. So again, Venus and Ketu are in the sign of friends. So there'll be some health problems with friends, some elements of a lack of trustworthiness among friends. Aquarius is in the Aquarius Lord as it has been for the past couple of years, is in the 12th house. But you'll see Jupiter move into Aquarius in November, so that sign should do much better financially. And after mid-November, also there's some disarray in home life for Aquarius right now. Some frustration about that. Mercury's in the 8th house as Lord of the 5th house, so it'll give the potential for underground or unseen romantic involvements. Sun and Mars are in the 9th house, basically good for career life, although again, some anonymity connected with career life for this sign. And essentially some good combinations for financial gain. We have so Pisces. Pisces has Rahu and Moon in the 3rd house. That's a good placement. It tends to make the sign eager to go after its desires, but it'll be a little bit uncertain about its desires. Mercury's in the 7th house. Good relationship potential. Good potential for business investments and for business partners. Sun and Mars are in the 8th house. Good possibility of gains for real estate and financial growth for real estate. Venus and Ketu are in the 9th house. That's still somewhat good because this is a good combination for this chart. It'll give a lot of financial growth, but a lot of the money will have to be spent on other things. It'll be taken away. And Saturn and Jupiter are in Capricorn in the 11th house. So friends are okay, but a little bit conservative or a little bit dull. Okay, so that's it for this week. Again, keep in mind, we are going to be moving into music videos. What form that'll take, I'm not sure. And they'll probably start with discussion, then demonstration. But I have to make sure all my instruments are working correctly and I have the right equipment to do that. Also, I will be speaking at Asha Vidya Gurukulam on November 5th. I invite you all to check out that website. You can attend virtually. There's a Vedic Astrology Conference in Sedona, Arizona, which is held pretty much annually, which you might be interested in. And again, if any of you are interested in talking on the show, or me doing a streaming kind of a setup, please let me know. I'll be happy to do that. I can answer questions from you directly. And I do consultations. I do accept students. So you can contact me at 508-525-0001 for that. Thank you, and namaste.